It'll be the interest group that it's shared with. Yes, David? Yeah, other members of the interest group. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Uh, awesome. Thanks, David. Well, I'm going to get into it because we've actually got quite a bit to do, even though the questions are going to be relatively simple. So I might just build a little bit on what David was saying about what we've decided to do here before we get into it. Yeah, look, my name's Scott. I'm a facilitator working in collective decision making and action in Australia, run deliberative processes, a part of the network, and hopefully we'll see some of you at Brussels. But the reason I am doing this is because I'm increasingly using kind of light touch theory of change frameworks, systems thinking kind of frameworks with organizations and groups that I work with to help align people around a shared vision and understanding of the system and where we're trying to intervene in it. And then that helps us with then any shared actions or individual actions that we then go off and do. We have a clear understanding of how that all fits together. So that's why I've ended up involved in this. As David said, this is all about the second stream of the interest group. So about developing a shared understanding of what we're ultimately trying to achieve in the field building and the priority actions that we can take to help get there. That says two. It should say 3 2-hour virtual workshops that we're going to run. This is the first. And the hope is that we're going to come out of this with a theory of change and a shared action plan. So what that looks like is, and this is stuff you would have seen before probably when we proposed this, but a bit of a flow. So the blue boxes are what we're going to focus on today. But there's kind of a logical series of questions we might ask ourselves as we set off to build a field together. The first is, what is our vision for a built field? We're saying we've come here, you've joined an interest group for field building. What does that mean to you? What are you ultimately trying to achieve? We're going to start there, and it might take us a while to firm that up as a group, but what ultimately are we trying to achieve here, for whom and why? But then importantly, the next bit is, what are the main outcomes needed to achieve that in the system more broadly, right? There will be a bit of a teething process here where we work out where people's heads are at when they talk about the system, and that's fine. That's what we're here to do today, and it'll get clearer as we go into the second session. And then something called intermediate outcomes. So it's almost like, okay, for whatever it is we want to have achieved, if these are the main ways the system needs to be working, what are the domino effects that need to be happening for those things to be realized? That's the focus of today's conversation. But then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to go, well, what are the parts of these kind of domino outcomes that aren't currently happening? Some part of the system may already be working in the way it needs to, but which parts aren't? And then what are our strengths? So what obvious or maybe hidden strengths or assets do we have as an interest group to bring to that problem space? And given that, what should our focus area be? What can we then uniquely help with that maybe other actors can't? Or maybe even things that we individually couldn't do, but together we're able to do. And then we can start fully planning our actions. So from there, we can talk about, are there things we can go off individually and do? Are there opportunities for some shared initiatives that particularly leverage those intervention points? What foundations do we need in place to be able to do that? Some things that will help support us to go do that, and then we can get into detailing that out a bit. So, like, who exactly is going to do what, by when, to make that happen? We can flesh that out as we get into the third session. I'm just going to share a bit more about what might come out of this, and then I'll check if people have questions. But I know this looks like a lot suddenly. I just want to show you a framework. This is just an example I've pulled from a previous project. Just to give you a sense of, at that top line level, this was all about getting communities prepared for floods in Australia. And you have a vision at the top. Ultimately, we want risks to life, property, and social amenity to be reduced now and in the future. But then you can see there are, say, 3 main big outcomes required for that to happen. There's a bunch of domino effects that then lead to that. And then there's, at the bottom, those kind of intervention points, those ways that we can influence that system to then help enable that. So that's the kind of thing that we will emerge with through this process. But But then here's what that looks like when it's connected to the action plan. So this is another project I was involved in where we developed a theory of change, co-designed with stakeholders about heat in Sydney. But then once you've got a sense of those key outcomes that you need to work on, you can then start grouping your action areas under that. So this, for example, was identifying the need for integrated stakeholder work in order to address heat effectively in Sydney. So then there were 3 key actions that came out of that that were all about coordination, and then they were assigned to particular organizations and so on. So that's kind of how that link will gradually emerge between the theory of change and the action plan. So I think that's all I will share at this stage on that. I just want to check, does this make sense, this flow? Do people have any questions, comments about it before we essentially get into those blue boxes today? I'll just give people a moment in case there is a question. Can I get a general sense of the room? Maybe give me some kind of jazz hands or something. Is this good? Are we happy to do this? Are we like ready to get into it? Yeah, cool. Okay, excellent. And we'll find our way as we go. Sylvia?
No, it's just that my own situation here is I'm so in the practical things with the seats and assemblies that this general vision
I know it feels
like,
quite, yes.
but I think it's good. It's good for the purpose of this interest group.
Okay, excellent. And I promise that if we just start the conversation, the whole point is that it will get more practical, but we will know that it's been strategic. So excellent. I reckon let's get stuck into it. What I will do then is I'm going to share the first of 2 group map pages with everyone. So I'm going to put a link into the chat if people don't mind opening that up. And I'll just show you what you're going to see as you open that up. So give me kind of a wave or let me know in the chat if you're having trouble clicking that link. But the link will bring you to a group map. And this is the question that it's asking. So you've come to a field building interest group. I'm going to put you in pairs and I'm going to ask you together in your pair to agree on a vision for a built field in the following format, right? So almost fill in the blanks. We envisage a future where who is experiencing what kind of long-term change because of what big system improvement? Who is experiencing what long-term change because of what big system improvement, right? This is about trying to understand what field building is going to achieve, ideally, at its fullest extent. And I've just given an example here in terms of heat in Sydney. So their vision was all people in Sydney are better surviving and thriving in a warming climate because people, organisations and places are more sustainable and resilient. Because then the next step is we start unpacking what's required for that to actually happen. Yeah. Does this make sense? Does anyone want to clarify that question before you have a crack at it in pairs? Lisa?
I think I need some more clarifications in that. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to do a very typical facilitatory thing. I'm going to ask, does someone else mind almost repeating back what I'm saying here, what you understand is being asked of you? What are we about to do? Lisa?
From a practical standpoint, like, why don't we just bring up an issue, like a problem, and then it will be easier to just grasp the main idea. So the question, what we are going to do, will simplify once we know the problem or an issue or something that we're going to deal with. So just please, yes, let's bring up something that really everyone might agree upon. What is the problem we're dealing dealing with.
Yeah, perfect. I'm just going to build on that and I'll go to you, Sylvia. I'd say, Lisa, when you go out into your pair, I recommend you essentially doing that. So you go, what for
Right.
you is the main problem you want to solve through this field building interest group, and put that up there. And then I'll help with connecting the dots to where other people go. What were you going to add, Sylvia?
No, just to say that it may help that we think about our countries or our region. Like I am always thinking, okay, what's field building in Brazil or in Latin America? What would be this in, so we can be more proactive on this.
Yeah, love it. And this is it. Feel free to come at it from your perspective, and then this is the conversation we're going to need to have: is to what degree are there common goals that we're working towards versus how much is it place-based? That will emerge as we go through it. But thanks, Sylvia. I think that's great. But I will encourage us that this is about why. We say we're building a field, but why? To what benefit? For whom? All right. So what I might do, I'm going to put us out into random breakouts. I'm going to give you 10 minutes or so. I'm not going to give you forever. I might actually give you 15 minutes for this first bit because it's our first time chatting together. Give me 1 second to create the breakouts. David, do you have 10, 15 minutes, or are you about to be pulled into something else? Oh, you're on mute, David.
I should be good until maybe about 9.
Okay, cool. All right. I will assign you to one of the groups in a second. You'll head off. You've got group map. Type your one vision in that format. We'll come back in about, say, 10, 15 minutes, and we'll chat about it together. Cool? Thanks, everyone. Sending you out into rooms now. David, it won't let me assign you because you're a co-host. So do you know how to open up the breakouts and just maybe pick one that you want to go join? You're on mute still.
Sorry. Okay, that would be in more, I think. And oh, there it is, breakout rooms.
Beautiful.
Okay, and let's see if there's one that doesn't have any one. Yeah.
Yeah, there should be 2 in everyone. So maybe if there's a particular
All right,
pair you want to join.
I'll just choose one arbitrarily. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Kirsten. People are coming back. Jim's back. Tom's back. Hello. Apologies. Someone there might have just been pulled out suddenly from the group. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for that exercise. Were there any who had trouble getting your bit just physically into the group map?
We didn't do
Yeah,
it.
David, your team. So, do you have something to pop in the chat? Or it was more that you weren't struggled to kind of land that vision as a group, which is okay.
Yeah, we had another urgent issue to discuss. Sorry.
Okay. No,
we
it's all
can
good.
share with you what we discussed.
Great. Well, I think the others will have done some of the other work for you, and we can check in on that. That's all good. So let's kick off. What I'm hoping we do maybe for the next 30 minutes, 25 minutes, is hear back from each pair. And what I'm kind of searching for is a merged vision that we could use as a working vision going forward. I've already got a bunch of questions coming up in my head as I look at this. I think there's some decisions that we need to make. Do we go this way or do we go that way on a few things? So interested in where we land on those. So let's maybe kick off with, I'm just going in the order that I had in the group. So Jacob and Joe, do you want to report back on where you got to?
Sure, yes. Maybe I'll give it a start, and Joe, you'll add if there's anything missing. We noted down, I need to check where it is. We wrote, we envisage a future where citizens experience better citizens participation because our governance systems changed. So a main discussion we had actually was around that we do citizen assemblies and all that stuff. But we don't have the impact yet, which we need to have. And so the change needs to happen on the kind of, in order for improving citizens' participation, the change needs to happen on the governance system. And so that was a bit our focus. And obviously, it's two completely different systems with completely different approach. But how do we actually plant the seed and start changing things within the system? And that could be kind of one vision we discussed.
Yeah, great. And when you say government systems change, if I'm just looking at your vision on face value and I'm not making assumptions, right? What is the way that the governance systems has changed in your view there?
We haven't really discussed that deeply. What I said is that currently the systems we have rely on elections, so they rely on competition, and they are, there's a lot of media, and kind of everything's happening at the same time. No protection, no safe spaces. So that's the issues we have, and so the system needs to change to be more cooperative and participatory, more open, more transparent. At the same time, less hierarchical, less competition based. Maybe that's a few features I would describe.
Yeah, excellent. Joe, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Jacob said well most of the things we discussed, and we need to have some room in the system that exists, right? So this can be at first a room where we coexist with the governance system and the decision making, and eventually we show or we prove that participatory democracy is actually really helping and change the system in a deeper way. And the feeling is that actually participatory democracy is going a parallel way to the current system. And the idea of planting seeds within the system that exists now. And from these seeds, we can actually spread out towards a new governance system. So what we are talking about is a new governance system where participatory democracy or citizens take the decisions, right, and not participate in citizens assemblies, write a document and send to the government and feel sad because nothing happens. So it's a much more proactive and linked to the everyday reality than what it is now.
Yeah, great. So there's a key point there in what you've made is about the impact, right? So this isn't for you, it's ultimately about citizens participating in active, impactful decision making, not just necessarily experiencing certain governance arrangements for their own sake. Yeah, okay then. And can I ask, actually, I might hold on it for your group, but I think the question I have in my head that I think the other groups are going to answer is, why does it matter that the governance has changed? Why does it matter that it's more cooperative, participatory, open, etc.? But I think some other groups have gone there. So let's head in that direction. Chim and Sanskriti, I've got you next. Where did you get to?
Yes, so we have this one where we envisage a future where decision makers and the general public are experiencing public deliberation as a normal part of our democratic fabric because of the proven effectiveness of citizens' assemblies or DD processes in addressing complex issues or public interest issues or problems in an inclusive, fair, and informed way. So it's rather long and sort of detailed. It's not like a simple statement, but what we thought was that, I mean, we were talking both about Canada and India. These are democratic countries. And we thought that, I mean, elections are very normal. And if, for example, in India, in certain local governments, elections haven't taken place and people do feel really uncomfortable and they are demanding that elections take place. So election is considered a very normal part of democracy. But we would like to see a future where deliberative processes, public deliberation processes are seen as a normal part. And if they don't happen, then the citizens ask for, the public asks for these to happen for addressing complex issues, not the simple ones, which maybe don't require public deliberation, but things that do require this inclusive process, informed process, then people do ask for it. And it's not, I mean, we recognize that for the general public to start asking for it may be a much longer term cultural change that we are looking for. And it may be that we work with decision makers first, with the public oriented public officials who might see the value of these and then start to do such processes, and then they get embedded over the longer term. So that was our thinking. Jim, please add.
Excellent. Jim?
No, I think Sanskriti covered it magnificently. I think the one thing I will add as well too, and this is a bit more of a personal thing. We didn't really have a chance to discuss it within the group, but I think it's embedding it within the democratic fabric, yes, but it also can include a number of different levels and context as well too. Like, for example, in an ideal world for me, it won't even just be governments running citizens' assemblies, for example, but people integrating deliberative democracy into their workplace, people looking, having universities and academic institutions and having them run more deliberative processes. And so a built field to me is something where deliberation is part of our government, it's part of policy making, but it's also part of decision making at large as well.
Excellent. So that to me is sorry, what was that, Sanskriti?
Oh no, I was just saying yes, exactly, that it becomes part of our culture.
Yeah, and I think this is so important. Here you go, you got Jamie, jazz hands going. So I think this is that's an example of one of those forks in the road, I think, for us a little bit, right? Like, are we, as a field, as an interest group, do you want to focus particularly on that civic, citizen, political or public decision-making piece, or is your aspiration broader than that? Do you start in one area and then broaden out? We can work that out. But I think Chim has definitely made that provocation that, is it just about those issues or is it broader? I also want to acknowledge that some elements that you've just added, the two of you, to what we'd already had before, like as we keep building this out together, is the idea that why the change in governance matters is because it is this kind of increased public participation, deliberation is uniquely positioned to address complex issues in an inclusive, fair, and informed way. That's kind of the so what of all of this, is what I'm hearing. But let's keep testing that with others. So Kirsten and Tom, which one did you have in this list?
The last one.
Go for it. Talk us through it.
So we actually just put together our two ideas. People from all walks of life make informed decisions about how we live together. And then citizens' assemblies are being institutionalized for solving political deadlocks. And this is already quite a field, I would say, of things you could envision. And yeah, mean, maybe Tom want to talk about what he has in mind. For me, it is just maybe a personal impression that the potential of citizens' assemblies and deliberation has not yet been exhausted by the way we are implementing and doing them. And I think this functionality of democratic institutions and their lack of being able to solve some of the real, let's say, hard issues we are facing, that citizens' assemblies could be a solution to this situation, that something to unlock this potential of deliberation would be something I'd be really interested in.
Fantastic. Can I just note, first of all, that solving political deadlock bit feels like it's it adds an element on what the last group was just talking about. I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but it's kind of if you were to say that increased citizen participation in these decision-making processes is, the other group was talking about is, in an inclusive, fair, informed way. You've almost added like a constructive or what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's more likely to get things done. It unlocks possibilities that go forward. And I think we know from our work that what often the kind of deliberative processes we work with can enable is they create common ground that unlocks solutions that didn't maybe previously exist.
If I had thought of it, I would have added trust. I think that's a very important word we need to have in our vision, because trust, societies that lose trust are really becoming just terribly, I don't know, violent and sad.
Yeah, excellent. So trusted, and that's part of, I suppose, that productive unlocking the deadlock piece is that it's because there's greater trust around it that actors can move forward with addressing some of our more complex challenges. Excellent. I want to go to Tom around to hear from you generally on this, but particularly around the institutionalized bit. Is that for you a deal breaker of that's the position that this field building group needs to be focusing on, or could it also be broader than that?
No, it could be broader than that for me. I think, to take it to the top, it's like, well, okay, we want social justice and good things. And then how do we get there? Well, we have everyday folks involved in making decisions together. And how do we get there? We need institutionalization of good democratic practice, which to me is citizens' assemblies. But then how do we get there? And then Kirsten and I were talking about, what are the steps to get towards that? So the field building could be anywhere on this ladder for me, which could be raising awareness of their ability to solve problems, so building the belief that these things are good. It could be, Scott, you said, what about one-offs? Absolutely. I think one-offs one-off citizens' assemblies can give people the idea that, the more that we normalize this idea that deliberation is a good way to make decisions, the more that we will have case studies and the more we will expect to see it institutionalized, the more pressure there will be on institutionalization. And then when there's institutionalization, there'll be more pressure to do more institutionalization and better institutionalization. So I think, the field, and in order to support that, we'll need the capacity, right? So the field could be about the capacity. It could be about building the belief that these things are credible and feasible. Could be about building public pressure to achieve major political change. So I think the field could be any one of those things, or it could set its sights on what for me is the higher level, which is, we're making good decisions together as people to avoid the horror and get toward the good.
Yeah,
and
excellent.
For me,
Thank
I
you,
see
Tom.
institutionalization as a necessary part of that, but it doesn't mean the field has to for me.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. I think that's good. I think it's brilliant. Thank you, both of you. Debbie and Sylvia, which one of these is yours?
No, we haven't We haven't written anything.
Oh, that's
so.
right. Sorry, Sylvie. No, you
But
told me
I
that. That's all.
can, yeah, I can.
Yeah, talk to me about what did you talk about?
Yes. Well, I think Debbie would agree with all that has been said, and we would agree with that. And I think I catch the last sentence from Tom: avoid the horror. And I think that's what we were discussing. I mean, we are doing our work to kind of rescue democracy, right? To rescue democracy, and I think we are talking about a competition with the current political system that is based on these electoral games and this non-representativeness system. And so I think our big system improvement, I would agree that this a new government system with our process being a normal part to avoid the horror, so people can help to avoid the horror, because our political elites not always do that. Unfortunately, most and more are not doing that, avoiding the horror. And so that's our problem, because Debbie was sharing with me, and we have discussed that in the network in previous annual conferences, how practitioners and advocates in autocratic systems, autocratic countries, autocratic situations are working very lonely, very lonely. So I don't know how much we can think about a big system improvement. Starting from some parts of the world, starting in some ways to face and to fight for this autocratic trend and the horror trend that we have now. I don't know if I expressed myself very well, but I think one thing that I want to mention is that the proven effectiveness that Sanskriti has said, I think it's very important, very important. I think this is a drive for our field building, proving effectiveness.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Effectiveness. So I think, hang on, let me just.
Even for electoral purpose, because if we don't convince politicians that this works for them, we'll have to take them off the field. I don't know if we want that, but I want to keep the good politicians, so I want to prove to them that this is good for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, can I say, like, first of all, I want to just acknowledge as you said, the horrors that we are all dealing with in different parts of the globe that are the big why behind these meetings and everything that we're trying to do. So I want to acknowledge that, you know, sometimes we push on and we don't explicitly talk about all those things in these kind of meetings, but it's there and it weighs on us as well as motivates us. So thank you, Siva. I just want to acknowledge that. I think also I want to take your point about the, you know, autocratic societies and the idea that different parts of the globe have different starting points for this, different baselines, right? But I think what's been really clever about the way people are wording this here is that it's an uplift from a current state, right? So you're using language like people from all walks of life are experiencing better public participation in impactful decision-making, depending on their starting point. That will look different maybe in what we achieve, you know, in a certain period of time, but that can be applied slightly differently in different parts of the world to begin with. So I just want to acknowledge, I think there's a kind of place-based proofness to how you're approaching this, that it can be adapted as needed. Debbie, did you want to add anything?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Sylvia. It's I know we had this discussion at length last time. Lisa actually shared her experiences, her current experience in Georgia. So I'm not going to talk about our current challenges in Israel, but I just want to say that I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and we in Israel, my group, who are facing a lot of backlash from the government at the minute, and we're really trying to promote, as we can't condemn the government because we're working with the local authorities and all that, but we're still talking about institutionalizing, and we're still talking about creating a culture of deliberative democracy, and we're still trying to do that, and we are very proud of what we've achieved with shared societies of all cultures and religions in Israel, and we're continuing to do it. But I just want to mention, just to maybe articulate it, maybe just say something about. I see it as developing, or maybe this is something that I need, like a protective narrative that frames deliberation in ways that will be accepted by the autocratic or on the verge of autocratic governments, while we're still advancing democratic practices. Because democracy here in Israel right now is a very dangerous, well, it's not very, but it's becoming more and more dangerous. And it's, you know, you can't even talk about studying democracy at school anymore. Or so I think that we need to find a way that will help us develop a narrative that will be accepted by people, extreme right-wing governments, so that we can still practice what we're doing and still be and not be penalized.
We use the word resilience. We use the word resilience.
I did use the word resilience, yes.
So maybe not only building, but resilient, resilient field, not only built field.
Thank you.
Because we still need to win. We still need the trust of, you know, the government, but as practitioners who are trying to create this culture, spread this culture.
Absolutely. So I think I would recommend on that point that we need to think about this in two steps. So the exercise we're going to go on through this in the remaining two sessions, it's okay for that to be slightly more internal facing theory of change. That's for this group to be clear on what it's trying to do. But then I think when we then look about how we translate that into external narratives, we need to absolutely make sure that it's it's appropriate for the audience in terms of creating that safe space to share, advocate for what we're advocating for, and increase the chances of it being taken seriously. So Debbie, I suppose I want to encourage you to let's say what's needed now in this safe space, and then let's talk about secondary how we frame it externally. Thank you. That's brilliant. And I'm thinking I'm trying to workshop a combined vision as we talk. So I think some of the key words are coming out. There's almost a few heavy hitters that are carrying a lot of the outcome. Welcome to Benjamin too, who's popped his video. Well, I see. Welcome, Benjamin. So I'll go to Alex, Jamie, and David. What did you talk about?
Let's see. We talked about two levels. There's ultimate outcomes, like why political change matters. And then we talked about maybe this would be like your intermediate outcomes, but outcomes for field building and ultimate outcomes. Actually, I want to share my screen for a second, because Felipe and Indira and I have been looking again at the basic stuff about democracy R&D's vision and ultimate outcomes in preparation, in the terms of reference, in preparation for Brussels. This is relevant. So for ultimate, I just want to share one piece here. It's this piece about our vision. We envision democracies that incorporate everyday people in major public decisions through processes that are blah, blah. Why? They enable our democracies to overcome polarization, to build public trust, and respond effectively to major challenges that our present structures fails to address. So it's respond effectively to the big challenges, overcome polarization, build trust. That's the ultimate piece. In terms of field building, 2 outcomes. One is that, where did I write this? One is about the public and one is about public decision makers. For the public, everyone knows what lottery selected deliberation is and why it matters. Outcome number 2, for decision makers, lottery selected deliberation is the go-to method for solving tough, controversial, gridlocked issues.
Excellent. Is that written down, or do you mind popping? Oh, here we go. Everyone understands. I can see that one. There we go. It's up there. Excellent. I think this is where you're really getting to the heart now of where are we going to focus our efforts? So I think that's probably almost kicking us off on our first big outcomes required to achieve our broader goal. So thank you for that, because I think that's what we're going to go to next. So I'm just going to mark those for that. Anyone else in that group want to add anything before we continue on to the next group?
Maybe one thing, I don't know, I think it's because people in the 70s have been more affiliated with political parties and unions and all this kind of stuff, and somehow this citizen assemblies also should increase the space where people actually meet and talk to each other, as opposed to only meeting online. And I think that's also a potential that has to be stressed for the whole idea of public deliberation and doing citizens assembly.
Yeah, can I use that, Kirsten, as a question to the group? We talk about citizens experiencing better participation, and I think you've just given an example there, Kirsten, of what that can look like in terms of spaces for that aren't necessarily strict citizens assemblies or whatnot. Am I right that we're thinking about experience in the broader sense? So people may be directly involved in some of the things we're talking about here, or they witness it, or they go on the journey from a distance, or they benefit from it and see how that better public participation enabled that. Like, are we talking about experience in the broader sense in different ways? People aren't necessarily saying every single person has directly been involved. I'm just trying to get a sense of how we define experience. Any comments on that?
I don't know. For me, it's 2 things. It's people often want to engage in politics, but they don't have the same amount of time they had in the 70s. And so this short-term opportunity is something they can actually do. And if only observing citizens assembly, they can trust into the fact that something is happening, that the process is happening and that people are discussing as representatives and producing outcomes that they can trust in.
Yeah, excellent. Chim, and then Jamie.
Just to add on to that, I totally agree with what Christian was saying, and I think someone said the key word earlier in terms of public trust, and the idea that, you know what, Canada, for example, 40 million people. I can't imagine everyone, even in our best of dreams, is going to be able to have a chance to be invited to a citizens assembly or be able to participate in a citizens assembly. But if people are aware of it, even if they're never, there's a dividend that comes of being a part of these processes. It can activate you. It makes you more ingrained into your community. There's better trust in government. You see the process and it really changes you going through it. Then there's the dividends that happens around, right? People see it, they see the process, they see, and they start to build trust, not only in the process, but in governments and in policy making themselves. I think deliberation is an antidote to issues such as apathy in the public, issues such as polarization. And so even if for me, the word experience, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to actively be involved in a citizens assembly, but to experience some of those dividends that kind of permeate throughout society when you can actually have faith that it isn't just a group of elites that are making these policy decisions in a vacuum, that it's maybe not me, but my neighbor, who's also been activated and been a part of this, and that I might also have a chance to have, I might also have an opportunity to be able to shape my community at some point as well.
Excellent. So I think once again, I think that's a great example of what we'll kick off with the second part of today's conversation, which is like the key outcomes that need to be happening in the system for this to work. And I think one of them is that trust network, right? That the broader trust is being achieved. And obviously that's the broader populace, but it's also the trust of other actors to then actually trust the processes to deploy them. I'll go Jamie and then Lisa, and then I'll just check in with our last two groups. Jamie?
Thanks. Yeah, this is a really interesting aspect. And I think one of the things that we did with the Global Assembly, which I believe was a first, was due to Claire Mellier, who had an experience during the French Citizens' Assembly that was very interesting. After the assembly, the citizens said, we would have gone much further if the public knew what we had just learnt, right? So with the Global Assembly, we did an experiment, as Sanskriti and Kunal will know, where we sent out an invitation to communities around the world to download a 3-hour or 8-hour or 2-day version of what was being learnt in the Global Assembly. And I think there was something like $50 to groups that would do it. Now, we had a poetry group in Goma in the Congo doing a version of the learning. We had a mosaic group in Beijing downloading and learning. So we were finding out, it's very much a prototype, but we were finding out how possible that is. So to respond particularly to what Kirsten was saying first, there is an opportunity to have community groups, and it can be as varied as a poetry group or a rugby club or a nunnery or a year 10 class, right? Where they go through an aspect of the learning. So even though they're not in the Citizens' Assembly itself, they are able to understand what's happening in there. That also encourages the people in the assembly itself to know that we're not alone, that we can be brave, because a lot of the public are also getting their heads around this shocking horror, as is the word of the day. And I think the other thing that's really valuable is the greatest advocates by 100 miles are the participants themselves. Now, I don't think you can film an assembly as it's happening. It just freaks out everybody. But what you can do is do advocacy training, which is what we do with One World or None, advocacy training for participants. And then when the assembly's finished, out they go onto radio, TV, interviews. We did that with the Norway national one, and we've done that with the local one in Cumbria. And what's happening is people see them talking about it. And they're not your overqualified, overeducated types. They're like your roofer from Wolverhampton who's going, I've never done anything like this before. Two things. One is, now I've learned about climate, we're in really serious trouble. And the second thing is, that assembly thing, we should make all our decisions like that. Everybody comes out saying that, right? But that's people seeing people advocating for it, which is a very powerful way of bringing people into the experience, in my experience.
Excellent. I think let's keep that thread, because already that is filling out the way that we're thinking about what we need to achieve here for a built field, what it looks like. And I think potentially I need to see how this comes out in the wash, but it's not, there's that trust building exercise of the broader group is kind of an outcome that I think is going to fall under this vision, but also maybe it's so core to what we're talking about here. It's about better trust in deeper decision-making processes is kind of what we're trying to achieve here. Like that's actually core as well as a part of the system. So let's keep working with that. But Lisa, what were you going to say before we go to the other pairs?
We might be the following pair, Sebastian and I, but at this moment, I definitely want to add something else to whatever been discussed so far. I agree to you, Jimmy, a million %. But in my country and the countries like mine, where people never get used to deliberate or discuss anything because we're a post-Soviet country, for 70 years, people been living together but not discussing anything, and they actually grew out of the habit of sharing some of their own thoughts with each other, because there might have been some prosecution, some things, people been afraid to talk to each other. And one thing is that what the deliberation brings as the empowering people with the knowledge. So you have never been in the environment of the post-Soviet countries. I'm sure none of you did, but you can imagine, I myself, under my PhD empirical research part, I've conducted 4 of them, and I saw the people, how much delighted they were by the fact that they learned the things they never ever had a chance to learn before. So you empower people with deliberation. You empower something that you're giving them some kind of knowledge that and once the knowledge is shared by 2035, it becomes more powerful. So that is the power of people and the public opinion. So at this point, once our term will come, we will tell you, Sebastian and I, what we've discussed on a very practical problem solving way. So that's my point.
Yeah, excellent. So I think I want you to go into that, I will just acknowledge again that we need to make sure that the vision that we're describing here is one that is still true of every country, even if there are some that, as you're saying, the public participation baseline is different to elsewhere. So let's please speak up if you or some others here feel that that's not happening once we land something. But also, I think we will naturally find that there are slightly different intervention points and narratives and things that need to happen in certain parts of the world. And I think it's the job of this group to own that together and keep working through that. So thank you, Lisa, for that point. But do you want to report back on what you and Sebastian talked about?
Yeah, like Sebastian, like we can. I don't want to talk too much, so you start.
Well, Sebastian, there we go. There's the hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I can present, and Lisa, you can add something if I'm missing it. We started talking about the conditions of our countries and the big problems that we see in regards of public and collaborative decision making in Georgia and in Colombia. And yeah, one of the central elements that we started discussing is the fact that we need inclusion and we need precisely these more participatory processes of decision making, because one of the problems is that the decisions in our countries are made through a central way, right? Through a centralized way, sorry. So it's really something around how can we start developing a concept that combines deliberation with decentralization or decentralized decision making, right? Because one of the biggest challenges that we have seen in our countries is that decision making is concentrated by an elite that is political, and fewer people that are always deciding and deciding for all of the people and for all of the country. And we see that there's a lack, and there's also, if you can see it as an opportunity, that we can start developing processes in a decentralized way, and trying to come up with more inputs and more inclusive ways of integrating marginalized voices into decision-making spaces, right? And that's the case also, we didn't discuss this with Lisa, but that's the case also of the conversation that we're having right now, right? There's a lot of citizen assemblies, and even in the field of deliberative democracy, we see a lot of concentration of centralized processes, even when we think of transnational processes of deliberative democracy, such as global assemblies and these other experiments. We see that there's there's a trend of trying to identify centralized processes and not really making efforts to decentralize the decision-making spaces on these processes, or even to decentralize the ways in which people can participate in different contexts or different countries, right? So maybe just to weave here on the conversation that we're having, maybe that's something to think of in terms of the deliberative democracy space. Lisa, not
Yeah,
really sure if
excellent.
you want to add something.
Yeah, and the benefits of decentralization in Georgia, I am quite sure that 95% of the population don't know. So the deliberation, that the process of deliberation could be wonderfully used for people to educate what the benefits of decentralization might mean and what each municipality, how to be better off on a municipal level. Once municipal budget could be collected on a municipal level and spent by municipal government. So not the central government going to be really conducting and allocating amount of what the municipal might be in need of. No, on the municipal level, whatever the taxes they collect, they spend for the people, for the benefit of the municipality as such. So I'm quite sure that deliberation would be greatest of all for people to teach what the benefits of the decentralization and the financial independence might bring to their homes.
Yeah, excellent. So I think what I would, when I draw that together with what others have been saying, I would say, and I think you just said it then, Lisa, the part of that challenge that this group could potentially help with is helping people better trust and experience interface with decentralized decision making in the sense of deeper public participation in that, and then some of the broader things you're thinking about decentralized government and you know the way that finances are gathered and spent is kind of an extension of that might go beyond this exact group, but it's certainly supported by that general increased trust in decentralized decision making too.
Scott, in Georgia we have a million other problems. But the main problem is that people don't know what to know. So people don't know what to know. So once deliberation is a tool for them to educate and tell them what the benefits might decentralization might bring, then each and everyone in a small municipality will learn things that they never knew before. So you empower them. And once that, well, even though the current government never let this decentralization happen in Georgia because they don't want that independence to be granted to the municipality level. We know this, but more people know, if more people know, that will be the power of people by the end of the story. So I believe in this. Yes, I believe in this kind of collective, like in a small municipality of 50,000 people, if 20,000 knows the benefits, believe me that this municipality will win over eventually. I'm quite
great.
certain.
Thanks, Lisa. And I think what you're doing there too is you're building on the point Jamie made about we almost need to elevate that trust piece to be almost core to this. It's not just about them experiencing this deeper public participation, but it's trusting it is almost core to our vision. So I'll just check in before we then move into the outcomes part of this. Avinash and C, do you want to share what you worked on too?
Only two additional things I would say. One is the part of information in terms of assuming that there's a great deal of trust deficit. First point is really the notion of citizenship in the first place. And that's why we wanted to use word residence because in Asian or in another context also, the whole concept of citizenship itself is quite contested space in terms of who's really citizen, gender, its intersectionality, and also your economic power or purchasing power, whether you have a land holding in the city or not. And then the notion of citizen in the colonial history also comes with the land ownership itself. So that's why residents than citizens. And it's often that the people who stay in vulnerable locations, whether a city or country, they're mostly on tenant, and the tenants are the second-class citizens in your cities, have relatively lesser rights over people who own the property. So idea really is this, that at least the source of information they should have the source of information for the resilience, so that in the worst case scenario of no trust in your larger governance ecosystem, at least information can be available for them to decide for themselves or to help themselves. So the self-help kind of system. So that was one aspect, right from the citizenship to information flow. The second is really larger challenging question to locating deliberative processes within these three popular challenges of power, authority, and legitimacy, because authority is not going to help in terms of giving deliberative space, which reduces their legitimacy, which is predominantly bureaucrats. And if the facilitation, or I'm scared of this using word, institutionalization of deliberative democracy, we assume that the power structure would do it in the spirit in which the civil society would like to do it, or enlightened people here would like to do here, because there is lottery system in certain processes in governance where they don't want to take a decision which will be resulting into better results, and they do use lottery in some situation, or in case of tie, it's used. So question also remains in that case, that how do you also, while institutionalizing deliberative process, ensuring that the life of deliberation and alternative also remains alive, without getting new normal, which is from democracy, so deliberative democracy, but no life of prioritization, or no life for the spirit of respecting each individual as citizens and as a.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, in a way, it's a problem we'd like to have, in that, we're then dealing with this is so pervasive. We need to make sure the quality remains. But I think we can build that into this exercise, this vision and outcomes. We can make it clear what ultimately we're seeking to achieve with this, the why behind it, and making sure that remains. Thank you. I mean, that, and I note your citizenship point too. I think there's some language that's also been used around people from all walks of life, which might be a more appropriate one for us to use for this. Did you want to add anything to that, C?
No,
I mean, Kunal.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. Sorry, Kunal.
No, yeah. Abhi did covered everything, but first of all, thanks for this exercise, was helpful to visioning that, and that as Abhi mentioned, that we have the approach was is to see how residents of can build their own understanding, like they should have in a better position to respond any risk, vulnerability, or a challenge around them. So how we can improve this scenario along with various approaches, kind of thing. That was the one of the way of thought, that how a citizen could be more prepared for any of the future challenges, and how we can help them, enable them what various the processes. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So there's a layer that I won't spend time on today, but we could write, if we wanted to, of this theory of change as a group later, which is the effects of this, right? And I think one of them you've just described is that deeper public participation does not just help with the decision-making in the moment, but also that increased resilience and empowerment of the individuals more broadly. So I think we should hold on to that as part of the why behind it as well. Thank you, both of you. So what I'm going to do, because I've got about 40 minutes left, I'm going to move us over, if that's all right, to the next part of the group map. And for those who've joined us, I'm going to repost the link for some of those who've dropped on a bit later. So if you look in the chat, you'll see a link that will bring you to what others are working in. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go straight into this activity so we all get a chance to keep going, and then we can hear from some of the newcomers when we report back on that. But here's what you should be looking at now, and I'm going to check whether we're just comfortable with using what I've put there as a working vision for the purposes of this activity, is potentially a summary of maybe what we've just talked about, is this idea that people from all walks of life better experience and trust deeper public participation in impactful decision-making processes, which more effectively, fairly, and productively address complex issues. So that's my attempt to try and pull in a bunch of what we were talking about just then. Very happy to take feedback on that, particularly after today, and we keep kind of refining that together. But hopefully that becomes sort of almost like a symbol of everything we just discussed, right? Trying to boil that down. Do people have any like critical issues with us using that as the just draft vision for this next step?
No, I think we can go with this.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is kind of representing what we just came from, but we can keep refining it afterwards. But my question to you now that I'd love to use this last 40 minutes for is, what main outcomes need to occur in the system to achieve this vision? And I know this is all very high level, but I promise you we're going to get down to some really practical stuff out of this. But I'll just build on that a bit, Kirsten. What I'm really looking for is what needs to be happening for people from all walks of life to be better experiencing and trusting deeper public participation. You know, it involves the authorizing environment of certain, decision makers. It involves the different touch points that people have to those processes. It comes down to the point that he's dropped off my screen, but that Avinash was making earlier about the quality of these processes and places that they're embedded. So all of that will be part of this. But what are those outcomes we need to be seeing in the system? And then if all those things are happening, this is being achieved. That's the question. Kirsten, you were going to ask something or say something?
No, you actually explained it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this will be a bit of just get it out there. Let's have a crack, and then we can refine it after the session. But does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, it does.
Scott, just to clarify, so it's not stuff we have to have control over. Like, it's just what we think.
No.
Okay.
And can I actually say thank you, Alex, because that's really important. That's why we're doing this exercise. This is a period where we get to just talk about the system and what's needed, and then we can step back and go, where's our unique role in that as this group? So yeah, this is not limited at all by what you can control. It's about what needs to be happening in the broader system. Tom?
Thanks. I'm just checking. So we've got our working vision here. We're going to haggle about that further down the line. Not now. I'm just checking in because, yeah.
I think share now what your main concern with it is, so people just have that in their heads. But I think I will absolutely share this out with the group afterwards, and we can gather some feedback that way, and I can refine and come back with something in the second session that's a bit more developed. But just what's your main concern with it, so we can keep that in mind?
I don't want to derail this right now, but my main concern at the moment is that it does not go far enough. So I think people experiencing, there's something, maybe it's in there. Maybe I'm just rereading it. It's about people experiencing these processes. To me, is not it's like
gotcha.
Individualizing the consumption of these processes, and that's the main thing. That some people are having a nice process and that's good for them, great, But I think to me, it's more, the emphasis is more on the impact that we are.
Great.
So we've got political power to change things that are fundamentally important, whether that's
Beautiful.
me doing that or someone else.
Yeah, I think we can even flip that, right? So the complex issues that we deal with are more effectively, fairly, and productively being addressed because people are experiencing and trusting deeper public participation. So we could even flip that to make put the emphasis there. But I think we'll take generally Tom's point there that this needs to be impactful. It's not just about people having a touch point with it, but the why behind it is that it's making a real difference. Last comment from you, Lisa, and then I'm going to send us out into breakouts.
Very short, like in the system, what you refer to the system is a governmental system or the CSO system, or what system you're talking about?
I know, and look, I'm being deliberately vague, is because I want to see what you come back with, and I want to see the systems that you're all thinking about, and whether we're only, because I think, for example, Chim made the provocation earlier that, in his view, this isn't just about public-facing systems. So if I'm going to be a pain, Lisa, and say, you tell me, what systems are you thinking about, and let's see what comes out. Yeah. I know that's a pain, but it's kind of deliberate. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to put you into just random breakouts, but this time you're going to have 3 people probably in each one. 2 or 3 people in each one. And you can add up to 5 ideas in there, but just be selective about it. Just what are our big outcomes that need to be achieved to achieve that vision? All right, I'm going to send you out there. I'll give you 15 minutes or more, and then we'll come back and have a debrief. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Sending you out now. Are you David? welcome back. Excellent work. I'm just looking at the last two that just came through right at the end there. Intention. Okay, excellent.
I had one that entered a little more quickly than I anticipated. So where it says ensuring that is not obviously a complete sentence. So
I see. Do you want to do you want to pop in the chat what that full version would be, and I'll add it in?
It's there. I think I put it up above.
Oh, you added it somewhere else.
It's
yeah,
like
okay.
it's just above. So
I thought you were just raising the bar for us, Benjamin. You're saying we should just ensure. That's the new standard for Benjamin.
I wish
I know. Exactly. Okay. So here is this is going to look reductive, but there's a lot of nuance, hopefully, that sits behind it. This is my attempt to summarize what you just did. So here's a few things that, like, when I look through that as a starting point, we've got our vision up the top. There's three kind of key streams that just seem to be immediately presenting themselves in terms of logic flows. So this flows upwards towards the vision. So if we want processes to be better utilized, you talked about better utilized by politicians. For example, politicians recognizing that, this is these kind of processes are an asset, not a threat. There's a lot there we've got to keep unpacking as a group. Government recognizing this as, for example, you were talking about, seeing it as a natural growth of democracy, right? That it's a living thing that continues to evolve, and this is an evolution of it, but also better utilized by people. So people calling for it, people actively engaging in it, and that this can be ad hoc or institutionalized. There were some examples of both in there. But for it to be better utilized, it needs to be better trusted, first of all. And for it to be better trusted, it needs to first just be better known. So there's a bit of it's almost like a maturity there, that as we go up that scale, we go from just awareness to, persuasion and belief through to action of those stakeholders. This middle one here, people experiencing the process directly and indirectly. So there's a bunch of things there where you were talking about the nature of the way people would engage with it, and that can be directly, but it can also be what's happening around that. I think we should flesh that out more as a group in the theory of change. And then finally, there was this idea that the processes also need to be more successful in solving real problems, right? Like, unless they've got a clear pathway to impact, it's measurable impact, then we're gonna have troubles with the rest of this system. But also that what that means is that the system needs the capacity and the resources to run effective processes, or run successful processes, I suppose. And I think that's partly, within convening bodies, but it's also within the broader system we work in. It's practitioners supporting. I know there's also people working on the role technology or AI could play in enabling this. So there's different areas we can work in capacity, but we know the system somehow needs the right capacity to run successful processes. There were some other things coming up that I would argue are principles that sit across all of it. And that's something we can accommodate in the theory of change, and that can really become a touch point for any work that we do in this system. And there were things like transparency, about the inclusivity of this and of the processes, and people talking about dignity. There was also understandability, the importance of people not just understanding things within these processes, but also the way that we go about field building being clearly understandable. But also measurable. So getting into the measurability of impact to actively demonstrate the success of these processes on real world problems. What are we missing there? I know this is very high level, and there's a lot more nuance that I'll flesh out when I give you a draft theory of change back. But is there anything big picture that we're missing from this summary?
I don't know if we should include technology somewhere, or just the word technology, because we can do a lot
for you,
of.
Where does it? What does it enable in your view?
It enables the participation of much large amount of people into decision making, into all sorts of participation into government decisions or local decisions. Or imagine, I don't know, the war in Ukraine, when we are sending military equipment to Ukraine, and there is a huge rejection of the German population towards this happening. And what about having an AI or a system that just gets the opinion of every single citizen and then says, okay, so we decided that we are not sending, or we are sending more, or whatever. But this can be done very quick, in a couple of days, with an app, for example. And a lot of decisions, big and small, can be done very quick. That is not probably necessary to use a citizens assembly every time.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right.
And I think that's coming through, right? Because you're talking about deeper public participation more generally. You've just talked there about the role of technology in enabling that, and not just that direct engagement, also that, I suppose, broad engagement. So we'll keep refining how we talk about that, but maybe it's not always about the broader group observing a deeper process with a smaller group. Sometimes the deeper participation is potentially a more deliberative, wider scale engagement, but that it needs to also then have a pathway to real impact. Chim?
Just to add on to that, I mean, we've already seen the advancement of so many different like deliberative or like democratic technologies, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of Polis and how they're able to work and how they are able to bring in the voices of so many people and even just get them into the vein and the idea of deliberation, even if it's just on a moderated digital platform such as that. And I think that can be used as a good way to augment a lot of existing processes as well. Like a project that I worked on back in Mass, we didn't have the full budget to do it the way I would have liked, unfortunately, but it would have been a citizens assembly, and as an add-on to that, a larger wide-scale engagement using the Polis platform to be able to both hear from people who weren't able to participate, of course, but also, again, to really be able to get that wide perspective on an issue and use that to be able to complement or even highlight some differences from the recommendations from the assembly. So just as an example.
Yeah, great. So I think once again, that's really driving home the point that it's not just about the wider group witnessing something that others are going through, but also them actively participating in a form. Tom? Oh, there we go. I'll come back. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, go, Tom.
Sorry. I think one thing that's not in here is popular movements for demanding these processes. So at the moment, we're kind of reliant on passive support from institutional champions to make these things happen. And I think if we want significant political change, we've got to include popular support for that.
Yeah, so there's almost like for now, I'm going to call it like initiated. But your point is that, by politicians, government, and people. So what I mean by that, and tell me if this is not actively capturing what you're saying, but we may end up splitting out this kind of logic chain. So there's a kind of a decision maker or institutional led kind of initiation of these things, but then there's also like the movement people led initiation of these processes. Am I understanding that right, Tom?
Yes. I mean, I'm not even thinking about creating an individual process, not like, okay, me and my community can organize a discussion about
No, but you're saying that they're agitating for it, they're calling for it. Is that right?
The general trend towards the institutionalization of this approach, the normalization of this approach through popular support. So yeah, it could be about just an individual process, but it could also be a push toward this approach generally.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jamie.
That just ties in perfectly, because I'd see that and raise your 10, which is that being achieved, that kind of movement being achieved. The big thing for me that's missing here is so much of this kind of public understanding of this and support of this and desire for this and demand for this needs to be achieved through popular culture, needs to be achieved through a very savvy cultural movement. that enhances the interest in this and the support in this very, very quickly. And that doesn't seem to be really evident in this logic chain, but I would add it into what Tom's just been saying.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to make a note that we probably, it's about splitting out. If we split this out, split out into kind of people-led, institution-led, that might help us a bit with that point as we flesh this out, because some of it is about, but I think the risk we're going to have is we are a small but mighty interest group. So at some point we're going to have to get to, well, what are we going to do to help with this? And it will be about going, well, there is a people-led pathway. How can we do that? Like, are we going to create an entire cultural movement? Is, what's realistic for us, and James saying yes. So then we go, okay, what does that pathway look like? And then also there's other pathways that we can work on that are more, working actively with politicians and government to have them initiate from that end, and then the two meet. Cool. So that's good. So I'll split that out so that we're treating those differently and complementary. Alex?
Yeah, agreed. I put that in the chat also, but agree with what Jamie just said. And also just, this might be too nitpicky, but it doesn't seem like a linear process to me, because like, as they're better known, then they'll be used and then they'll be trusted because people will see. So like, there's like many cycles also going on in here that I don't know how you'll encompass, but just wanted to point out.
Yeah, totally. I think I think we can definitely draw some of those in. And, for example, the success of the processes is an obvious one, and how that links in. So yes, I think we can do a little bit of that, and without getting too academic about it, we can acknowledge that, if we're working on this, it's also helping with that bit as well. I take your point too. Yeah, hang on. Yeah, this cultural movement element. Anyone else? Anything else that you look at that and you go, man, we are really missing a massive piece of this? Or is everything you're thinking about ultimately fits somewhere in there? Benjamin?
I was going to just raise my hand. It's probably buried in here, or not buried in here, but I'm just thinking like what has happened, what has been going on in the field, and raising that up, making that better known, like that this decision in Oregon was made through this process, this decision in France was made through this decision, and whatever, that these are happening. It's a live process, right? That we're not trying to bring in something new that's never been done. It's been done and it's been proven. So
yeah.
I think that's again, maybe in here, I've spent years here in the participatory budgeting world, and I still talk. I've been talking about it with friends for 8 years, 10 years, and I still mention it. Like, what is that? So it's it's been in the city for 13 years. So, but I think like this is not a new idea. It's growing. It's not running an election, but that's what I would add.
No, I think it's an excellent point, and I would say it's an extension of what Alex was saying, which is that this stuff feeds back into itself, right? So once you have successful examples that you can point to, that then helps feed the field building work that we're doing. Yeah, thumbs up from Tom. So that's why we'll map that. I also am going to use that excellent segue, Benjamin, for my final minute to talk about what's going to happen next, because the next piece, I will take what you've developed from today, give you a more refined vision than the one I just kind of tried to do while we were reporting back, to test with you and get feedback. But also I will flesh out what you just saw is kind of the beginnings of something that will do a much better job of taking the nuance of what you've just put in the group map and turning it into something that looks a bit more like this thing. Hang on. This thing I showed you earlier. Like, not that complex probably at this point, but it will look something more like this based off what you've said. And I might have a bunch of questions to come back with you on too, to kind of fill in the gaps. Yep. I love this thing you're doing, Jamie. It's great. It helps me. So I will come back to you with that. And what would be amazing is if between now and that next time we meet, that you do take a moment to look at it and give me some comments on it. So I'll probably put like a Google document up. And if I can get some thoughts from people before the next session, I can actually implement some of those improvements before we even come back together next. But when we do come back together next, building on what Benjamin just said, this isn't an entirely fresh thing. There is great work already being done in those outcome areas that we just described. So what we're going to do is a bit of a gap analysis. We're going to talk about where is this being done really well and where not. And I think something I want to start introducing in that conversation is the place-based bit. So do we almost think of like a maturity model in the sense that we go, there are different parts of the world that maybe have different gaps, and how do we maybe treat that as a group is something we need to decide. But essentially, we're going to work out which parts of this do we need to focus on the most versus what's already kind of going quite well. And then we're going to talk about, what's our unique contribution as an interest group here and as this gathering of organizations to help with that. And therefore, given those two things, the gaps and our strengths, what should we be focusing on? And that will almost become the head themes that we then develop our actions underneath. Lisa? No, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry for interruption, but I failed to propose my own thoughts about changing or having something new in the system. In my country's case, involvement of young generation and deliberation is the key, as I see myself. So you just can include in your chart. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And I think this is it, is we could start going, you know what? That's our intervention point, is we're going to focus on a generation coming through, particularly if, to Jamie and others' point, we're focusing on cultural change. That's a logical place to do that. So I think this is the kind of conversations we'll be able to have once we have a more involved kind of visualization of the system in front of us. So thank you. That's a great point, Lisa. I'm going to bring that to a close now because we're over time and it's 3 a.m. my time. So I'm going to go to bed. Thank you, everyone, for everything you gave to that. And I just want to reassure you that we've started in a very ethereal, big, open kind of space. And I just want to really promise you that this is all heading towards really tangible actions that we can take, but we will be able to describe how they strategically link back to what we're trying to achieve, right? So I promise it won't be up at this level the whole time. With each bit of the conversation, we'll get more and more tangible as we go. So thank you, everyone, for everything you put into it.
Big thanks to Scott for
Thank you, Scott.
a lot of work and an outstanding job, and 3 a.m.
Thank you all. See you later. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.